What's going on, guys? Welcome to 8-Bit Video Game Book Club. We are powered by Audio Technica as we replay some of the finest releases in gaming history. We're winding back the clock to 2010 for Alan Wake. This is a bit of a review with a twist as we look at how it holds up. But anyway, I'm your host, Jono Pech, and I'm joined by my friend from Rainbite, Mr. Jared Trail. How you doing, Jared?
Hello. Doing good.
You doing good? Doing good. How's game dev life treating you down in New Zealand?
It's busy, making games. Always got bugs to fix and problems to solve.
Ports to port.
All those things, yeah.
Yeah. So if you didn't know, Jared is the lead programmer for Rainbite, who put out Trigger Witch this year. And I had the pleasure of working on that game. But you're also a Pickpock experienced programmer. Is that the title?
That's the title, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird title, but it sounds good, so you can take that.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're talking about Alan Wake. Thanks to Remedy, I got my hands on the Alan Wake Remaster. You played the original on Game Pass, right? Earlier this year.
Yeah, I didn't know the remaster was coming out, and I was like, I may as well play it because I never got around to doing it originally.
Yeah. That's it. So we'll start off with like our personal memories or our experiences with the game. We're kind of going like comedy rewind style with the questions here, but I have no experience with the game before I played it. I remember when it came out because I don't remember if YouTube ads were a thing. They must have been a thing by 2010, but I definitely remember seeing ads for Alan Wake and thinking this looks kind of cool and different. Like you've got this guy, it's third person with a torch as the main kind of mechanic that you see. And that in itself kind of caught my eye, and it's probably like what I've associated with the game through the years. And like now that I've played it, it is like a huge part.
Yeah.
Of the game.
There's a lot of using a torch, yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of my experience was it's the torch game. I really didn't know anything about the story or even that Alan Wake was a writer or anything. And then Remedy put out Control, and I played that. So I probably like they're in the same universe, so that was probably my precursor to playing Alan Wake and getting a feel for the kind of trippy and weird stuff that they try to do, and that that they think outside the box. I think over at Remedy, and they do some interesting things with narrative and gameplay. So it'll be fun to get into that. But yeah, what was your experience, Jared?
Just in terms of overall, yeah,
like going back, like your early memories of the game and stuff.
Yeah, well, I had actually originally played part of it at a friend's place just because I was like, I may as well try it, but I didn't get anywhere near finishing it. But it's in terms of replaying it, and I thought it decently held up, and I didn't even play the remaster in terms of just like the feel of it overall. It obviously looks a bit dated, well, for me at least. I don't know. It probably look better for you, I guess. But yeah, I did still like it overall. I didn't find anything about it too dated feeling. Like it has some interesting parts with the driving, which feel maybe a bit janky. There's like parts of the games obviously that feel a bit janky and everything. But
yeah, we'll get to all that later, I guess, in terms of like the nitty gritty of what does and doesn't hold up. But yeah, like revisiting this game in that sense, for me, I definitely felt that it was, despite the remaster, it did feel dated, especially in like some of the like controls and some of the just gamey stuff that we've evolved past since then.
I remember the controls feeling pretty good overall when I played it. I didn't think there was much wrong with that for some reason.
I have many issues with some of the controls. We'll get to it like later down the track. But overall, I found it like I said, dated, but still like very interesting. Like I was very interested in the way that they told this story, and even though it's been 11 years, they were doing some stuff back then that people even now haven't really attempted to do again, at least not in the exact same way. They approached it in, like I said, completely out of the box with like the episodic format for a game that wasn't episodic.
Yeah, it's a bit interesting. I guess it's I'm not really familiar with the kind of things it's inspired by, but it's interesting that
DVD
they chose that. Well, yeah, I guess that. But, it's supposed to be like what's that show?
Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And it is very Twin Peaks. Like I watched Twin Peaks last year, for the first time. And as soon as the game started, and it's the small town, it's out in the forest, like the kind of tall trees and that kind of thing. It's like away from metropolitan civilization. It's very Twin Peaksy inspired, especially with like the just creepy, weird, unexplained mysteries happening in the background constantly. So yeah, I mean, there is on the remaster a commentary track that you like, a director's commentary you can have playing as you go through the game, which I only tried it to see what it was like, but playing a game for the first time, it's not really ideal to be having someone talk while there's dialogue happening.
No,
but if people
weird.
But if people are coming back to it for a second playthrough, then it totally would be quite fascinating to listen to that. One of the things that I did hear was that it was like 2010. You think about, that's like the kind of pre-streaming, but first era of like people binging through TV series and that kind of thing. So it was very inspired by like the DVD experience, and that's where the episode chapters came from as like the stylistic approach to telling the story.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I mean, they even, because Remedy also did Quantum Break, and they even didn't, I mean, obviously a TV integrated, but they did like an episodic nature to that as well, which is kind of interesting. Don't know if there was a reasoning for that either.
I just think they like to do things that are different. Like they just seem to have that seems to be like a core part of what they do, is like, let's not just do what everyone else is doing, and let's try and tell this story in a kind of fresh way. Yeah,
I feel like the narrative is always interesting, confusing, mysterious, I guess.
And if you go back to like Max Payne, even like the way that there's like a voiceover and it's like a noir style approach, like Max Payne's pretty old, but I feel like that was probably not a huge part of storytelling in games, is having that character like give that type of voiceover to paint the picture.
Yeah, possibly.
So we'll go back to 2010, look at what was happening on the scene. Avatar was the big movie release of 2010.
Oh, it's a big one.
Yeah. Only just got knocked off by Endgame, as we know.
Yeah.
After that, Toy Story 3, Alice in Wonderland, Iron Man 2. That was when the Twilight Saga reached its eclipse. Inception was big. Was still Harry Potter movies were still coming out. It was Deathly Hallows Part 1. Shrek movies were still coming out. And we had stuff like Grown Ups, Shutter Island, which is kind of appropriate because it's got some similar themes to this. And Jackass 3D, The Expendables, Sex and the City 2, Book of Eli, Social Network, goes on and on. So that's kind of what was happening in cinema at the time. And when you go over to like other games that were coming out in 2010, Mass Effect 2, Red Dead, God of War 3, Limbo, I didn't realize that was that old.
It's pretty old now.
Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Fallout New Vegas, BioShock 2, and Heavy Rain. So, pretty big year for video games. And this is definitely one of, I think this game and its kind of status holds up amongst those ones that I've mentioned. It's certainly, I think maybe being like an Xbox exclusive, it probably held a bit more notoriety as being one of the exclusives to Xbox that was known for its story rather than its like multiplayer experience that a lot of their other exclusives were back then.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's, I feel like it's seen as a cult classic. I don't know if it's like, like a smash hit or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's also probably, as someone that's like never had an Xbox, it was one of those games that I always thought like, if that was on PlayStation, I would have played it. Whereas there's like, honestly, it hasn't been like that many games where I've been like, I feel like I'm missing out by not having the Xbox. All right. Well, head over to most iconic sequence. This is hard when you've never played a game before to like kind of pick out something that's iconic, because I feel like the most iconic imagery is really just Alan Wake shining around his torch, which happens constantly. But I think we both came down on like the sequence with the rock stage. You know, you go to this farmhouse that used to belong to Odin and his brother Thor, I think, instead of Thor. And those characters are pretty crazy in themselves, but they've got this house with the rock stage, and you have to defend it whilst heavy metal music's blaring, and your friend Barry's doing all these crazy, like, was he switching around the lights and the pyrotechnics are going off and everything?
Exactly.
Yeah,
I feel like it was. I guess it was maybe the most different because it was more of like a tower defense type thing. Like you're obviously like defending a single location, where most of the game, most combat encounters are like they'll just jump you and then it slow mos and you've kind of got the enemies coming in and stuff. I think in terms of iconic things, or I guess maybe things I remember the most because I didn't play it super recently. It was like beginning of the year. Was like maybe like the underground bunker thing with the lady there who like kind of knew what was going on with all the spirit people kind of stuff, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe also the other standoff you have with that guy in the forest maybe is like another one. But I think the rock concert's the most unique of like a location.
Yeah, there's the moment like also when the guy has said that he's kidnapped your wife, and you get there and you realize that he wants the pages to the book.
Yeah.
From you, like he wants to know what's going to happen next. And that's kind of the moment that things start to like almost come into clarity as to what this story is going to be about.
Yeah.
You know, this whole kind of battle between Alan Wake's mind and like, I'll be honest, I don't really understand what this game's about. It's so like complex and in depth that, you know, it's one of those ones where you watch it and you're like, okay, I have to go read an article just to kind of figure out what actually happened. So
looking into it later, I didn't even fully get this when I played it. Even like this whole time, I don't think. But like, apparently, you had already written the book, and that's what was happening. And those are the pages you're finding out what you had already written, and it's like coming true because you wrote it. And it's kind of like, I don't know, like not even a time loop, but like a predestined thing. Like you were in some kind of like haze where you forgot what went on, because obviously at the beginning of the game you kind of forgot. You end up like losing track of time there, and you end up in a car and you just crash or whatever. But like in that time, apparently he was at the house like writing it, because towards the end of the game it kind of shows you some of that where you're like stuck in the house. So I don't really fully understand everything, but
there's the guy that's like forcing you to, like, is it the psychiatrist or whatever? He's like forcing you to write, and he's planning to use it for his own nefarious purposes, I think. Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, it's complex. It's easy to get lost, which I definitely did. But if we're talking about what holds up the best, which is the next question, I think the concept and the originality of the story is certainly the thing that, even after all these years, I feel like it stands the test of time. Like I can't think of many games that have attempted to do anything like that to that extent.
I do think what doesn't hold up for me, which is not even a holding up thing, I just don't like it, is reading generally in games. So whenever I would get the notes, it wouldn't really hold my interest actually like reading through them. So that's why I probably didn't get as much of the story anyways. It's because I wasn't that interested in reading the notes that I picked up.
Was there not a voiceover with the notes though for you?
Possibly. I mean, it was a while ago. Possibly.
Yeah, I mean, he reads the notes, so I probably more listened to that and maybe read ahead and skipped through the last bit. But yeah, so yeah, tell me what you thought about like the story as it was unraveling, because for me it was, you know, to have a game where like you just never know what's real and what's happening and what's inside his head, whether it's a supernatural thing or whether, you know, it's literally just he's like insane and he's like in a room in an asylum or something, because they do hint at the start of the game that he's been super stressed and like there's all these elements that are happening. So to never really quite understand in the moment what's real and what's not, I think that's something that works really well in this game.
Yeah, well, it's interesting playing it, because I guess with a lot of these mystery things, you're like kind of assume it'll be explained eventually, but playing through the whole game not really ever fully understanding what's going on until looking at it after is also interesting. But like, yeah, I didn't really know how I felt after playing the whole game in that sense, because I don't feel like I fully understood it, but I don't know.
So you said the gameplay is what holds up the best for you. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think like I did feel like the game like felt fun to play. Like it maybe got repetitive ish over a while. I thought there was maybe enough variety with some kind of like boss enemies you fight, but how you fight them is pretty much the same. You just shine the flashlight until they're weak enough that you can shoot them. But I always found the combat fun enough, like having to deal with dodging people and shining the light at them and like making sure you have a good enough battery and the different type of guns or whatever. Like there's enough gun variety, I thought, for the game's length. And then they do get to switch it up a bit with the trucks, like you get to drive at certain points. I thought it was varied enough. And I mean, it wasn't like my favorite gameplay of anything, but it kept me engaged enough throughout. I never got like bored of using the flashlight and stuff.
Yeah, I wish that they'd almost leant more into the flashlight and less into gunplay. Because for me, you know, it's great that you enjoyed the gameplay. I didn't as much. Like for me, what holds up the worst is a combination of some of the combat, some of the controls, which we'll get to. so I felt like the flashlight was a great mechanic to be able to use that to slow down the enemies, but it was never enough. Like you always had to shine the torch at them and shoot them, so it was never really.
Yeah, well, you could never beat them just by shining the torch, but it was kind of like you couldn't shoot them until they'd been weakened by it, and like having to know who to prioritize with that, I guess, or like, you know, distracting certain enemies. I found it fun enough, but yeah, obviously not everyone has to.
Yeah, and I did really enjoy like the torch parts of it, but I just found myself wanting to like shine the torch to like weaken them and then run away, like almost playing it in like a more stealthy like evasion type of way rather than wanting to shoot everyone. And there's also like a little bit of it where like there's some ammo scarcity as well, so you don't necessarily want to shoot every single enemy you come across. And there's parts where I think it's a bit clearer that you don't have to. Like you can run into the light, and then when you reach the light, they'll all disappear.
Yeah, you can definitely like rush to checkpoints if you see them up ahead, kind of thing.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a bit of that's a bit of the meta game of like, can I make it there? How many of these guys do I have to kill? How many flares do I have to use?
Yeah, like because like do I need to save my ammo for later, kind of thing. Which is, I never really felt like I ran out of ammo that much. I don't know if there's difficulty settings, but I was playing on whatever is standard, I guess, and I was just like, I never found it too crazy, but I did die a couple times in some of like the boss fights and stuff.
Yeah, I died a lot. And yeah, so I did have some issues with the combat. Like, I just found that like when I came across groups of enemies, I was just like, oh, not again. Like it's maybe it's like the stress of the scenarios, because they do a really great job of creating like,
you get surrounded kind of when you
you get surrounded, and it's always dark, and you can never really see everyone. Like you never really have a good sense of your surroundings, like what's behind you. And maybe it was just the fact that it's a horror game that had me on edge. But every time I came across, it's like you hear the enemies in that deep like possessed voice, like shout some kind of stupid thing at you, and you're like, oh, here we go again.
Because essentially you can usually hear something from them before it actually engages, like the slow-mo combat thing, which like shows you can kind of be aware sometimes if you're listening well enough. But I'm kind of surprised that you found it that to be like a problem with it, because when I played something like Prey, for me was like that, where I played Prey and I just felt so stressed the whole time because you're like always like under pressure of things being around. But I didn't find it as bad in this.
Yeah, I mean, I played Prey pretty recently before playing this, so it's interesting that you draw that comparison. I just think there's like the sections of the game, like because it's this episodic thing, you've got like sections that are at night, and then you get to like daytime, and that's when you can kind of breathe and be like, okay, like I don't have to worry about like if someone's going to jump out with an axe, or if,
Yeah, I can't even remember how many there are, but there's definitely some like kind of story moments where you're just kind of walking around in daytime, right? Like, I mean, there's some in the asylum type thing, and then there's some in the like the town.
Yeah, you're in like the trailer park at one point. You're in like the diner at the start and the cabin. So yeah, there's certain, and then like there's the moments when you with Barry at the cabin. So there's definitely those like down moments, and I enjoyed those, like the kind of exploration of trying to unpack what had happened the previous night or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. It just every time I came across like those dudes with the axes, and you get overwhelmed, and I was just like, oh, here we go again. Like, and I think the fact that the combat, maybe this is the element of it being older, but aiming the gun never really felt great to me. And
interesting. Well, 'cause I found it pretty all good, I guess, just because it's like wherever the torch is, the middle of the torch, that's just where you're going to shoot every time. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. Except that I was trying to like headshot them so that I would conserve my ammo, and that wasn't always easy.
Okay.
And then the controls, like you mentioned that you didn't really have an issue with it, but I hated the way that the button...
You hated the dodging and running, right?
Yeah, it was the dodging and the running. Like, the running was... I can't even remember, but you have to, like...
It's like a bumper or something.
Hold down R1 or something to run. And it was always frustrating to me because if there was no enemies around, you could just, like, run forever. But if there were enemies around, dodge and run with the same button.
Yeah.
And if you hold it down, you sprint, but you only sprint for like 5 meters. And then he starts like running really slowly. And then you don't know, like, do I let go of it and press it again? And then he starts running fast again. Or is he just completely out of energy? So that was something that bothered me because I just wanted to sprint. I even like remapped the controls at one point so that like the traditional L3 click in was the sprint. But then when I, like on the PS5, it changes it for every game. So when I went and played something else, it was annoying me. So I ended up like undoing that and learning how to do it properly. But yeah, that was, even like that control scheme is really dated. It certainly like doesn't hold up.
It kind of depends what type of game
you'd never play a game now. You'd never play a game now that's R1 to sprint.
Yeah, generally not. I guess it kind of depends on the game, because sometimes they'll design it in a way where they think it's the best way, because it means that if it's on one of those buttons, you can easily rotate the camera and stuff whilst dodging. I guess you could do that with L3. The thing is, it's not supposed to be a sprint button. I think it is more of a dodge button.
But there's so much of the game where you're trying to like run across the wilderness through the forest, or you're like running away from these people that are chasing you. So I don't know. I wish there was a separate dodge and sprint buttons. So I think that doesn't hold up for me. Yeah. There was a sequence on the bridge. Do you remember the bridge scene? So you're crossing a bridge, and all the stuff starts flying at you, and you have to shine.
Towards the end?
Probably middle of the game. You have to shine your torch at all these objects before they fly at you to destroy them. And it took me, without exaggeration, like 25 to 30 minutes to get across this bridge. Because I just couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. And it took me so long. But
use that dodge button.
I think it was just that the game never explained how to destroy these poltergeist objects. I just had to work it out.
You just aim at them long enough, right? Like, you use the torch.
Yeah, exactly. But there was, because of the way that it was set up, I was thinking like, okay, am I meant to get to the end and then jump off the bridge? But there was a panel like on the bridge that was blocking the way out, and I had to shine it at that panel to destroy that panel. And I just kept dying, and it was...
It's because you were trying to run past them. Is that the problem?
I guess I was thinking like it was a speed thing. You have to do it quickly, but you actually have to slow down one by one and destroy each of these things.
It's kind of interesting because I never felt throughout the game that I didn't know what to do. I felt like it, like as I was playing it, like I never really was lost or confused about what to do, unless I'm remembering wrong. But I did feel like it was generally pretty good. So it's interesting to see that you didn't think that it was communicated well, I guess, as to what you were supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, I might have been distracted by something else that I was like listening to or talking to someone or whatever. But there's not really, and this is sometimes a good thing and sometimes not a good thing. But I don't think that they really tutorialized the gameplay in that way.
I can't really remember, but I'm sure they have like pop-ups on screen at some point. But yeah, they didn't like tell you like this is how you beat the poltergeist item.
Yeah. And I had another sequence like that where you're in like a cemetery and you have to basically survive for a certain amount of time while Barry like fumbles around with the lock to open it. And that was a section where there's so many enemies, and the way that you control as a character, like it's actually impossible to just avoid everyone, and you run out of ammo at a certain point if you try and kill everyone.
Yeah.
So it was this game of like, what's the path through the cemetery that I can take to avoid getting hit the longest? And that took me a really, really long time as well. Not that that's a bad thing. It did feel really good to finally get past it, but I feel like it could have been better. It's just the way, I think that it's, how old this game is.
It's possible,
There's things like that I just know like they wouldn't do it that way now.
Yeah.
Did you have anything you wanted to talk about for like what holds up the worst?
What did I write down? Did I write down something?
You wrote down visuals. So
well, yeah. I mean, I didn't play the remaster, so obviously, like for me, it was. I'm sure the frame rate was capped at 30. It's a bit smudgy looking because that's kind of the era where everyone used bloom and motion blur and that kind of stuff quite heavily. So for me, it was just like visually a bit messy. But I mean, you played the remaster. I'm assuming it runs at 60. I don't know if you have any other options.
I don't think there's there's no ray tracing or anything like that. It was basically like they redid the character models. They look pretty good in the in like gameplay, and then when it switches over to like cutscenes, it actually looks slightly worse than the gameplay.
Interesting, yeah, because they're pre-rendered, I assume.
Yeah, so it's a different type of rendering, or it's a different type of animation, I guess. So that is a little jarring, but it's also like you don't have the highest of expectations for a game that's this old when it comes to the cinematic quality.
I mean, they obviously didn't remake it. They just touched it up and made it run better. Which, to be honest, I kind of wish I would have waited because I like frame rate.
Yeah, and I don't even really notice it most of the time. Yeah. So, but I think like if you compare it to like the Mass Effect remaster, they probably didn't spend as much time trying to make it look as good, or it doesn't seem like it. I have no idea how much time they spent on
I mean, Mass Effect, they did make quite a lot of changes in terms of textures and models and stuff. I mean, I haven't looked too much into the remaster for Alan Wake.
Yeah. A couple other things I wanted to mention that I didn't think held up great. There's an immersion in this game that's missing because of some of the gaminess of it, which, as you know from working with me on Trigger, which I was always trying to make sure that everything made sense in the world.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense that there are literally just batteries and ammo everywhere in the wilderness. Like, everywhere you go, there's batteries. Like, why are there so many batteries?
In the remaster, they took it out, but there used to be Energizer batteries specifically.
Yeah.
It's inside of the original where you always had the Energizers. No, obviously, I don't know. That's games, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure every game's got things like that.
Yeah, but it usually, and at least in every game that I'm ever going to be involved with, I'm going to try and make sure that it makes sense. But you're just finding batteries. It's not even like, okay, if I was involved in this, I would be like, okay, you're going to find you're going to find a TV and you have to take the batteries out of like the remote control. Like it's not just batteries.
A pack of batteries, like a fresh Energizer pack waiting.
Like I've been on bushwalks, as I'm sure you have, or for our American listeners, into the forest or the woods, and I've never found batteries. I've never found a survival kit.
Yeah, with this flares.
They have those kits with just like flares, shotgun ammo that you can just grab. There's no lock on it. No. Batteries, which it's very convenient in the game. You're like, I need batteries. My my torch is dying. Thank goodness there's some batteries. It's like coming across an oasis in the desert. But
it's always great when you find the mega torch, which has like even more
Yeah.
power.
definitely. And the flares, and what else was there? There's the flashbangs. There's flashbangs everywhere. So it's maybe it's an American thing. Maybe if we go for a walk in the woods there, we do find guns and ammo just lying around. But yeah, not in my experience. And that was just like a little bit of an immersion breaking thing for me. But it is a game. But at the same time, I don't want to let them off too lightly by copping out and saying, "Oh, it's just a game."
Yeah,
it's possible to make it work. And like, I think the other, like, the Energizer thing's hilarious. It's a great branding, product placement tie-in. But
yeah, I don't think it's necessarily
survive the
immersion
remaster.
breaking for me, because essentially they took it out for the remaster, but like it makes sense. I don't know. I'm not too bothered. It's like obviously Death Stranding with like Monster feels a bit on the nose or something, but like having Energizer batteries, like it's a battery. Like I don't know.
I
It
heard
makes sense.
There's a lot of TVs, and you can watch this like
There's like ads and
Twilight
stuff.
Yeah, there's like Twilight Zone-ish TV show, but I think in the original there was
I think it was Verizon.
Verizon ads. Yeah. So that's kind of I think that
I'm still
they
okay
knew
with that because it makes sense. It's like a TV doing ads. Like it doesn't make
the
like
same
no
for the
sense.
same company every time. It
Yeah.
would be,
Well, a lot of ad space, you know.
yeah. But I think they knew that wouldn't hold up well, so they removed that. So I'll give them a tick.
It's either that or
for that.
I bet you there's something to do with like an agreement where it was for the release of the game on a certain console, and so they could take it out without breaking any kind of agreement, I assume. So they probably did.
A lot of coffee in the wilderness too.
Coffee thermoses, yeah. I definitely didn't collect all those. There was no like reason to, like law reason, like you didn't get anything apart from like an achievement, I guess.
Yeah, there was trophies for it, but I think basically that was the developer's way of being like, oh, what's a power up that a writer would have? Oh, coffee. We'll put coffee everywhere. Like
Yeah.
Crash Bandicoot gets his Wampa fruits, and Sonic gets his rings, and Alan
gets
Wake
coffee.
gets his coffee. That's the pick me up that he needs to keep going through the night. You could argue that the coffee was drugged and he was on these hallucinogenic like trips the whole
Maybe
game.
you found the true story.
Yeah, that's my fan theory. The last thing that I want to say that I thought was a bit off was this FBI agent, Nightingale was his name, and he was very heavy-handed with his author references. Like he wouldn't let up. Every time he sees you, he's like, "Oh, Stephen King over here," and
Yeah.
"Oh, L. Ron Hubbard." Like he's just constantly. It's like he thinks he's a stand-up comedian or something. He's just constantly. Like he's meant to be really serious, and he's trying to like take you down.
Yeah.
It's like The Fugitive with Tommy Lee Jones going after Harrison Ford, except Tommy Lee Jones wasn't like wisecracking the whole time. So I found that kind of like a little bit jarring and a bit of out of place, as far as like they clearly going for this humor from this character who's meant to be like trying to be a loose cannon badass, but it was a bit heavy-handed.
Yeah, I didn't like stick out to me or anything because I didn't even. To be fair, I didn't remember his character that much. But so I don't think I noticed
remember he
it.
starts shooting at you.
Maybe.
There's like a standoff when you're at the trailer park. And he just starts firing at you, and the cop who's like the sheriff is like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah,
like,
no, I do remember that actually. Yeah.
But he's like wrapped up in the whole like weirdness, the possession kind of whatever's happening in the story of this game. There's people who've probably played this game like a million times, listening, going,
They don't know anything.
"Hey, we're just two guys that played the game and tried to follow along."
Yeah,
So-
it's not like I wasn't paying attention. Like I was specifically paying attention, but I didn't read many of the notes. That's my bad.
All right. So as far as like the prevailing themes, I felt like, from what I gathered from following the story as much as I did, love was a big theme. Like it was like a story about him chasing after his wife. Really,
Yeah, it's like the main reason why he does any of it is to get his wife back. Really, yeah.
yeah. And then you've got this other idea of like destiny and like I guess, predestination, and can you escape what you're
Yeah.
fated to do, and can you outrun destiny and that kind of thing, which is a cool kind of trippy little motive to be running through as a thread, I think. But yeah, like they're the ones that I think were what they were aiming for at the time, and they certainly hold up now. Like,
I mean, I would say it's a bit generic. I mean, it's pretty normal in terms of, your loved one gets captured and you have to go save them.
Oh, yeah,
That's a pretty, we would never do that. It's a pretty, like, I don't know. It's something that, like, it's obviously an obvious motivator. Like, you can hurt or whatever to a family member of someone, and then that's an easy motivator for them to do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the thing where I think they get points with that is that it starts off being like, oh, I have to get my wife back or find out what happened to her, and then it becomes more like, what's going on here? Like,
Yeah.
what's what's reality and what's the truth and why?
It's not the only thing which makes it more interesting, because obviously it has all that stuff with the pages and stuff that you've written, and then the other writer that's like the dude in the lake, and then like the lake house isn't even there, and you've got like all these other mysteries that make it more interesting than just being that.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about those notes, though, as much as it was a compelling mechanic to have this story set out that was like a self-fulfilling prophecy or whatever it was, it did kind of ruin some moments for me. Because it'd be like, and then the guy jumped out with a chainsaw, and then like, oh, you're like, okay, so I guess a guy's going to jump out with a chainsaw, and then 5 minutes later, a guy jumps out with a chainsaw, and it's like, okay, I knew that was going to happen. So they're kind of like, spoiling things just 2 minutes early. The next question I have is, where can you see the influence of Alan Wake in games now? So you mentioned, like before, it's more of a cult classic than some big hit, like some of the games that came out that year, Mass Effect 2, for example, just because we've talked about Mass Effect on Video Game Book Club. But is there, as you were replaying this, was there times that you're like, okay, I can see the DNA of this in games or in stories in games now, like 10 years later?
For me, in terms of, I wasn't thinking, I guess, as much about story. I feel like I was more thinking about mechanically, and I don't even know if this was something that was, I can't remember the order of this, but there was a lot of horror games that did the whole, you got a flashlight, but that's like the only thing you have.
Right.
As like, and I don't know if that was inspired by this or if that's just a thing people just kind of already had going. But that's kind of the main thing I would think of, obviously, because the flashlight's such a big part of the gameplay. But in terms of like how narrative is designed, I'm not really sure. Did you have any specific ones?
Well, I guess going back to the torch, like, it's not even like just the torch, it's the concept of light and like the darkness, and it's quite literal, like the darkness is bad, the light's good.
Sure, yeah.
Which is a metaphor that's as old as storytelling, really. Like, even goes back to, like, biblical times and stories, and Star Wars, the Force, the light side, the dark side. So that's certainly an interesting take on it to apply it to combat and that kind of thing. But yeah, and I'm trying to think of those horror games. Like, is Outlast the one where you have like a video camera?
Yeah. And but they're like very non-combat. Like you're just avoiding people and stuff, and things like which is probably before, but like Amnesia, and did a lot of things with like light and sanity and that kind of stuff, and like similar, which I think that one was before, so who knows.
Okay. And I guess as far as the story, like, there's certainly strong connections from Alan Wake to Control. So I think playing through Control first, I'm really kind of keen to go back to it, especially since it runs.
You got to play the PS5 version, yeah.
Yeah, since it runs so much better on PS5 than what it did on my base PS4. Like, barely got through the game. But because I know that they're in the same world, I actually similarly struggled to keep up with the story of Control compared to this. And there's a lot of even more things to read and collectibles to ignore in Control, which eventually I started to ignore them because there was so many. I was like, I can't get through this game if I stop and read every single thing. But I am keen to go back. Even the there's like the objects of power in Control, like I guess minuscule spoilers for Control, but there's the objects of power that are like these possessed items that you can interact with and then fight something.
I mean, I'm assuming you know about it, but there is an Alan Wake DLC in Control, which I have played, which
I have not.
Which is to do with like the objects of power. There is one, and there was an altered world event that happened, which is the Alan Wake story, essentially to do with that. The typewriter, I think, was an object of power,
or a thermist. I think there was a thermist that was an object of power. Maybe that was in the base game.
Yeah, I think it would have been. But the whole DLC, there's like a whole thing where you end up seeing projections of Alan Wake talking and stuff like this. It's I can't even remember what happened in that because like you said, the Control story very confusing. The DLC story for me still confusing. There's like a lot that goes on. Easily confused by these stories. Remedies.
Yeah, we're not very smart, are we?
No.
At least if people play Trigger Witch, they won't get confused. You can be sure of that.
Straightforward.
But yeah, I know that Alan Wake is referenced in some of the collectibles, so he's certainly part of that universe. And I think the theme of darkness and destiny is again a big part of Control as well. So there's certainly those vibes and DNA from like the way that you watch these TV stories in Alan Wake, and they've done the same thing with the FMV videos in Control with using real actors and that kind of thing. That's a small thing, but that's certainly, you can see that they tried it first in Alan Wake. They may have even done it in Max Payne, I'm not sure. But that's still part of what
you can see things follow through that they seem to like, which is seemingly integrating live action, because they did it in Quantum Break had a literal TV show attached to it, and then they're having the FMV like video stuff in Control, and so you had the stuff on the TVs, but you also had like the projections when you were getting talked to by certain people and stuff like that, which is interesting. And obviously, I didn't even think about that, but the fact that it is like that Destiny is also like a big thing in Control too, where it's like you're destined to become the leader person. Can't remember what the name is.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Director.
The director, that sounds right. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, and even just like that eeriness and things that move on their own, and
a certain creepiness to it.
Yeah, the poltergeist side of this as well is certainly a thread that runs through all the way from Alan Wake to Control. And I'm sure there are other games that are influenced by this. I mean, Heavy Rain came out the same year, but some of that type of storytelling, like there were elements of this game that did remind me of that Quantic Dream style of storytelling. Not
I was going to say, was it the movement for you?
the janky movement?
The janky movement.
Maybe that's it. Maybe, yeah.
I mean, so something which is kind of the other way around, I guess, but like, to me, it feels closer to something like a Resident Evil 4 or something. It's got a bit of that vibe in terms of like creepiness and like maybe even control scheme, because obviously that's a bit janky too, but like it gave me a similar vibe to that. Obviously it didn't inspire that, but like probably inspired by it, I would assume.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. This is time, or should I say it's now time for the Modern Solace Omni-Tool Award, which is an award we present to the character who shows up and, like an Omni-Tool, they get the job done. They light things up. We've named it after Morden because he was the character that I think we gave it to for the Mass Effect.
Nice.
Well, actually, no. He wasn't in Mass Effect, the first Mass Effect, so we just named it after him because he's just a great character, I guess. I can't remember who we gave it to. I think maybe it was Rex. Anyway, so I guess this is a time we can just talk about a few of the characters that stand out in Alan Wake. So Barry, your best friend, who's kind of the comic relief. You know, there's the moment that I was going to mention earlier where he comes out, he's covered in Christmas lights, and that's his way to fight off the darkness. And I love that moment. There's a radio DJ who is at a certain point you think like he's going to be your savior in some ways, but things don't really work out. There's Thor and Odin, who are like the heavy metal rockers from, well past their prime, and now I guess they're in like the asylum, so you're not sure if they're crazy.
Yeah, you don't know if they're telling the truth for any of this stuff. Yeah,
and it's the kind of thing where like, yeah, sure they're crazy, but maybe they're just crazy enough to be able to help you.
I think for me because this award's for like someone that just like stood out, right? So it's like,
yeah,
for me, I mean, I guess Barry's easy because he's there so much, but I don't know if that necessarily makes him stand out. That moment is funny though, where he's wrapped in the lights. I do think for me, one of the characters that seems to stick with me more is that like lady in the bunker who's kind of chilling there. She knows about all the like don't go out when it's dark and everything. For some reason that just sticks with me a bit more, like her knowledge of everything, because everyone else is always confused by it and doesn't believe you and stuff, and she's like, I've been through it, because she would like knew the original writer guy that screwed it up in the first place and everything. And I thought that was maybe it's kind of a short character. It's like short-lived part.
Yeah,
but it can be, I guess.
It stands out, and it's fascinating when you've been shrouded in so much mystery to meet someone that actually understands what's going on.
Because like Barry doesn't believe you for a while, and you're like, "Am I crazy?" Like, but then and then he finally like gets it, and you're like, "Yeah,
yeah." No, that's a good one. Can we give the award to someone that we've written down in the notes as old lady in the bunker?
Well, yeah, she's not iconic. I can't remember her name. Yeah,
yeah. There's also like the doctor who kind of tries to convince you that you're crazy, but he's in on it. So yeah, I don't know. I want to give this to Barry. We both had Barry on our respective lists, so I think he's probably earned it. And congratulations to Barry. Next question: does Alan Wake pass the internet relevancy test? I'm gonna say no. I don't think it's made its way into like memes or anything like that in the way that some other games have.
There's nothing that I can think of where people have like made memes of any part of the game. I guess there's nothing in it that necessarily would be that I could think of. I don't know.
The closest thing I can think of is like there was this tweet I saw where someone was breaking down how many jackets or layers Alan Wake was wearing.
Oh yeah,
because he's got clearly a jacket on top of a hoodie.
Yeah,
but then if you like slow down and look at it, you can see there's another jacket in there, and he's probably wearing a t-shirt underneath that as well.
Yeah, that's a lot of layers.
That's like at least 4 layers. And there's a moment that I tweeted about when I played where I was like, okay, this is ridiculous and this doesn't hold up. His wife is sitting in the cabin on the bed in her underwear and a tank top.
Yeah,
it's clearly for the male gaze, and he's wearing like these 4 or 5 layers. And I'm like, okay,
he's at a cold spot in the house.
Yeah. This is clearly like something that wouldn't happen if they made the game now. Like they would, I guess maybe it's like a limit. Like you'd think, like, is it a limitation thing that you can't change what Alan Wake's wearing? But no, they changed what she was wearing. So why wouldn't you just strip it back to a t-shirt?
There's probably more effort involved with if you're able to control the character to do with like an animating character with way more animations than a single person on like just sitting on a bed or something. But I don't know. Look, it's possible. It's been possible.
There's been outfit changes in games before 2010. So
yeah.
I'm not going to give him a free pass. I'm sure it was an effort thing, but come on, it's 11 years ago. They're probably not listening to this. I can call them out and tell them. I can tell them that they were being lazy.
Well, maybe you should listen to the commentary, and then maybe they would have explained it.
Actually, that's not a bad idea. I wonder if they acknowledge, even just simply acknowledge that, this is a bit funny that we've got his wife essentially naked while he's wearing enough clothes to go into the snow.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Second last question. Could you make this game today? What would the modern version look like? I think it's a yes. Like I'd love to see something that plays with the same kind of mechanics. Less combat and more probably stealth or evasion with the torch and finding creative ways to use the torch. For example,
some more gameplay variety, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, and they even kind of tried to do this where in a couple of sequences there were lights that you could power up that would turn on and shine onto the enemies to, I guess it helps slow them down. But then they would
it'll
turn
power them
off.
down enough that you could shoot them because it would like weaken them to a state. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be cool to see them play a bit more with that as a mechanic, and maybe there's something that you shine your torch on and it amplifies or reflects on an angle to, to hit multiple enemies at the same time.
That might feel very gamey, but yes, possibly.
Yeah, but like to have that torch actually be the thing that kills them or that like makes them disappear or something, I think that it would be more interesting than just making it a shooter, essentially.
I think if it was made now, it would probably have a more integrated narrative to the gameplay in terms of cutscenes, something closer to a Last of Us in terms of like having it be a bit more seamless, so you weren't just having like a cutscene and then reading notes in the gameplay was kind of like the two things you'd have. Like there is a little bit in it, but like more unique moments maybe with like more custom things, because like the control and the gameplay doesn't really change much as you're playing. But for me, games like obviously God of War and stuff like that, they have so many moments that feel more unique as you play through them, more memorable, because there are so many parts of this game that are forgettable, I guess. Like just going through forests and like a lot of the areas.
So much forest.
Yeah, it's a lot of forest.
Yeah, and like a lot of the puzzles I think hold up pretty well, but you could certainly, having it. I found the game more interesting when you had someone with you.
Yeah, it's a classic Naughty Dog thing. Really, you always have a companion, so you can like bounce off them.
Yeah, so he's not talking to himself, I guess. But yeah, so I guess coming back to the question, I think, it would be more seamless. It would be more flowing between the narrative and the combat. Maybe there would be less focus on just shooting, more enemy variety, like
or more unique ways to deal with enemies, I guess, would be one thing. So because like. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of based around this whole light mechanic, and the game could even just be shorter, more unique, more concise, have more in it in a shorter space, possibly. Not that the game's especially long, I don't think. But if you're not going to change the mechanics, it's probably better to keep it shorter so that it doesn't get old. But for me, like I said, I don't think it actually really got old, but obviously, some people may have. Especially if you take 30 minutes to get across the bridge.
Yeah, totally. Or to escape a graveyard.
Yeah.
So the last question is Alan Wake still a good game? What do you think, Jared?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still a good game, but I find it hard to like completely think it's amazing or completely recommend it because I don't fully grasp everything. I always find it unsatisfying to get to the end of the game and be like, oh, they didn't explain everything. I mean, they kind of did. Maybe I didn't understand everything, but it's not as satisfying. And so, like, for that, it's like, for me, the gameplay was good. I found that fun, like, finding collectibles and stuff. And, like, I found it fun enough with the variety of that. Like, there could be more, but I still found it good. But the mystery for me, I guess maybe I prefer a more simple story. Like, having some twists and stuff, but, like, with it being so confusing. I had the same problem with Control, where I got to the end and I was like, this game was good, but I still don't fully understand everything.
Yeah, I'm in a similar camp. I would definitely say it's a good game, and I would say if you've never played it, it's still worth going back to just for the experience. And I say experience because it's not just the story, because the story on its own is kind of like, it's an interesting take and it's an interesting way to tell the story. But the story in its own, like you said, to me, it doesn't hold up completely when it's hard to understand. Unless you really like these kinds of deep narratives that you have to possibly go back and read a recap to figure out what happened. Or
you watch like a 1 hour YouTube video where someone explains the story afterwards and be like, that was great.
Yeah. So yeah, some people are really into that and they should definitely play it. And then some people are more, maybe they appeal to like the horror elements and the combat, the actual gameplay. I think those two things together, the narrative and the gameplay, as far as like the unique elements of having the torch and the lights and the way that the narrative unfolds with the collectibles explaining what's happening before you get there. The whole thing, like, I think as a package, it holds up. There are parts that don't, which I've mentioned already in quite a bit of detail. So if you go into it thinking like it's gonna be a bit janky, it's gonna have some things that wouldn't exist if the game was made now. But if you grew up playing games in that era, it might even be nostalgic to go back and play something that feels like that or looks like that, or reminds you of games that you played back then. So
I mean, I'm sure the remaster, because it looks and feels better, like I think it would still hold up decently well. So I think it's still worth playing, especially with the remaster, because I still found it fine without it, and so I'm sure it's only better.
Yeah, definitely. So that is Alan Wake. That is a video game book club. Jared, where can people catch you and see what you've been up to?
Well, I mean, I mainly just use Twitter, I guess. Jared Trail on Twitter, or Rainbite if you want to see my indie dev stuff. And then there's things coming up that I've been working on at Pech if you want to follow them too.
Yeah.
But
what can people look forward to with Trigger Witch? We've got some ports that we can talk about by now, right?
Oh, I don't know the rules. I guess I make them kind of, but yeah, I mean the PS5 version's coming soon, Trigger Witch, and I guess it's fine. The PC version will be coming at some point. We're going to figure that out.
We've said that before.
I'm sure I've said that before, yeah.
I've said that before.
Okay, cool.
Maybe I wasn't meant to. And there's also like physical editions that are starting to arrive in some people's mailboxes.
We have some of those at Daniel's place. He's got the Switch physicals for us. Some people have been getting them, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. All right. Trigger Witch, if you've missed it somehow up until now, go get it. For my side of things, there's plenty of comedy rewinds and future Hungry Gamers episodes for you guys to look forward to. We've got the biddies, so get your submissions in for the 8-Bit Awards and vote for your games, movies, TV shows of the year, amongst some other really fun questions. There's also the Festivus episode coming up soon, so you'll be able to submit your grievances in the year of 2021 in gaming. So don't miss that. I'm sure Brendan and Ali want to hear all about what you have to complain about. But for now, you can obviously subscribe, leave an iTunes, or I guess I should say Apple Podcasts rating and review. You can do that in Podchaser or anywhere that lets you rate and review. You can grab your 8-Bit merch over at shop8bit.net. You can support us on our Ko-fi page. That's ko-fi.com/weare8bit. And until next video game book club, I don't have a sign off because I've never hosted this podcast before, but stay hungry. Bye.
You've been listening to The Hungry Gamers, one of many gaming and geek culture related podcasts from the 8-Bit Collective over on 8bit.net. Check out more episodes on your podcast service of choice. And while you're there, please be sure to rate and subscribe. Until next time, boys and girls, stay hungry.